music pals, it's Miss Thrift-Winch. We are continuing with our Lives of the Musicians stories, and today we're going to hear about Mr. Charles Ives. Here's just a little bit of the Symphony Number 2. So, Mr. Ives was born in Danbury, Connecticut in 1874, and he died in New York City in 1954. He was a modern American composer famous for unconventional piano works and symphonies, one of which, the Third Symphony, won the Pulitzer Prize. The New England childhood of Charles Ives meant so much to him that he refused to visit his hometown later. He couldn't bear to see the changes that had taken place. Ives worshipped his father, a band leader who was always trying to stretch Ives's ears with unusual sounds. Ives started learning piano, cornet, and violin at age 5, and later the drums. The neighbors complained. At 13, he was the youngest church organist in Connecticut. On Saturdays, he played ragtime piano. Sometimes his interest in music confused him. What was he doing inside while other kids were playing outside? So he went out for sports, track and tennis, football and baseball, and he excelled at these too. Except as a church organist, Ives never earned money from music. He was a New York businessman and ran a highly successful insurance company. Most people at work had no idea of his secret life. Each evening he rushed home and wrote music that recreated the sounds of his Yankee childhood. Ives married a woman named Harmony, who, despite her musical name, was a registered nurse. They adopted a daughter, Edith. Edith was allowed to play with her dolls under the piano while Ives composed, as long as she was quiet. The family had a horse, a dog, and a cat, Christofina, who ate asparagus. Summers were spent in the country in a spacious house full of books, surrounded by hills. Ives kept his old baseball cap in his studio, and also pictures of his father and Abraham Lincoln. When Ives's music started becoming better known, he didn't seem to mind its unpopularity. I'm the only one, with the exception of Mrs. Ives and one or two others perhaps, who likes any of my music. Ives had a heart attack, the first of several, at age 32, and began to live as a recluse. He wrote his music in pencil with such a shaky hand that almost no one could read his writing. He had a photographic memory of everything he'd written, all 10 drawers full of messy manuscripts in his barn. Ives did not own a radio or record player, rarely used the phone, and would yell at airplane pilots from the ground. He shunned publicity. A Life magazine photographer said he had never seen a person so terrified of the camera. He wore old soft shirts, old pants, a battered brown felt hat, and an old corduroy jacket. He drove a Model T and was a wild driver. An apple pie American, he liked to write letters to the president suggesting amendments to the Constitution. When Ives felt sad, he would play Onward Christian Soldiers until he felt better. When he felt happy, he sang a nonsense song about codfish hanging in the sky. In the evenings, he would sit before the fire, and Mrs. Ives would read aloud for several hours from Charles Dickens and Jane Austen. Ives liked iced tea and roast pork. He wasn't supposed to eat sweets, but sometimes did anyway, and the milk he was supposed to drink he threw out in the backyard when people weren't looking. After he was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in Music, he gave away the money. "Prizes are for boys. I'm grown up," he explained. Ives had his final heart attack at age 79. One of his uncompleted works was the Universe Symphony, meant to be performed outdoors by orchestras on the tops of several hills. In our musical notes, Ives's orchestral works are said to be the most difficult composed by any composer anywhere. Hardly any of his music was performed during his lifetime, but by 1976, he was the modern American composer most frequently heard in orchestral performances. Ives's favorite piece of his own music was the 4th of July, part of his Holidays Symphony. It has the sounds of a small town celebration, women unloading picnic baskets, fireworks, political discussions, and competing marching bands. The Concord Sonata, his best-known piano work, has sections named after the New England writers Ives loved: Ralph Waldo Emerson, Nathaniel Hawthorne, the Alcotts, Bronson and Louisa May, and Henry David Thoreau. This work is so difficult that Ives wrote a book to go along with it called Essays Before a Sonata. Ives was an enthusiastic borrower. Old hymns, cowboy songs, Christmas carols, Stephen Foster melodies, African American music, and the theme from Beethoven's 5th Symphony can be found in his work, all used in new ways. So, That is Mr. Ives. Tomorrow we will hear about Mr. Stravinsky. Igor Stravinsky wrote some really, really cool stuff. I really like to listen to his music. It's very, very interesting. Hard to perform, but very, very interesting. So until tomorrow, bye guys, gals, and music pals.